Welcome into a special edition of Daily Faceoff Live, coming to you live from Montreal. Tyler Yaremchuk and Frank Seravalli with you. The show is a presentation of Bet365. You can download the app today. Use the promo code NATION. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. International man of travel, Frank Seravalli as well, pulling up to Montreal just in time for this show, fresh off the Super Bowl.
It's been a busy 48 hours. Go Birds. And hey, just happy to see you. It's been a while. I don't think we've seen each other this season, yet we obviously talk every day.
Yeah, we do talk every day, and you're right. Yeah, last time we would have been doing shows together would have been in Vegas, I guess, for the NHL draft.
Yeah. That sounds right.
Yeah.
I was going to say Cup final, but that would have been later.
Would have been later. But anyways, excited to be here with you. Excited to be doing a little show on a Monday evening for everyone. So cozy in, maybe pour yourself a glass of JP Weisers, and let's talk about the Four Nations face-off, Frank. We're going to go through every team individually. We're going to do some sort of keys to victory, X factor things for all the four rosters. But first, let's just do a general vibe check. I was down at Media Day today, got a chance to hear some of the players speak, and I'll say that for me, hearing guys like Sidney Crosby and Matt Tkachuk and actually see them talk about how excited they are for this and that this actually does mean something to them. I know there are a lot of fans who are going, make-believe tournament, the league's just doing this for money. It means something to the players, and as much as I was maybe skeptical coming into it, I am excited.
If anything, the league is spending money on this, not making money. So to me, international competition, look, it's been since 2014 that we've had best on best. And I know that this isn't true best on best. No Russia. Obviously, there's a whole pile of injuries that have just crippled some of these rosters here in the last couple days or weeks. But you wait and judge Four Nations face-off based on what you see on Saturday night, U.S. Canada at the Bell Center. Some of my favorite hockey memories from my childhood, 1996 World Cup of Hockey at Bell Center, at Wells Fargo Center in Philadelphia. It was some of the best hockey played, and you could make the argument also make-believe tournament. Never existed before. It's been a bastardized tournament since then. We see the World Cup of Hockey every few years. So you don't need special medals. You don't need a trophy. All you need is jerseys, flags, and a lot of bragging rights and pride on the line.
Yeah, and I was going to say, if it's Canada and USA, you know it means something to those players. So we'll talk about Team USA in a little bit. We'll talk about the two European countries as well. But let's start things off with the team that'll be the host team for the first week here in Montreal, Team Canada. The big question, Frank, and the big story that kind of developed over the last few days was the health of Sidney Crosby. Didn't play in the Penguins' last few games before the break. He was on the ice for practice today, and unlike when he practiced earlier in the week with the Pittsburgh Penguins, Crosby was shooting the puck, and he looked 100%. Speaking afterwards, he's good to go for Wednesday. That is a massive sigh of relief for Canada, and also, again, the vibes of this tournament. Having Sid the Kid elevates it.
I had absolutely zero doubt that Sidney Crosby was going to play in this tournament. Was I 100% confident that he was going to play in Game 1 on Wednesday night? Not necessarily, but look, this is going to be Sidney Crosby's last chance to represent Team Canada on Canadian soil. He's named captain. We know how much this means to him. He takes that responsibility incredibly seriously. And the injury, a left wrist injury, I believe it's a sprain. He was spared from anything more serious by virtue of the plates that he had surgically installed in that wrist in September of 2021. It would take a lot to fracture something there. So he got really lucky in that sense. And it's a wrist that's kind of plagued him throughout his career. If you go back to maybe 10 years or so ago, 2014-15 is when that wrist really started to bother him. I knew he would be here. Again, wasn't sure it would be Game 1, but it would take a lot to keep him out of that lineup.
And he is on a line with Nathan MacKinnon, which brings me, Frank.
Zero surprise, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, how many Tim Hortons commercials do you need to watch in order to know that those two guys are going to be playing together?
Yeah, and John Cooper did say in his media availability that he consulted some players when talking to them about what to do with the lines. And he said it wasn't like sitting down a guy and saying, who do you want to play with? Okay, I'll make it happen. It was more like, what style of player, what will bring the best out of you? I think it's pretty easy to see a scenario where Sid and Nate bring the best out of each other.
All right, tell me if you think I'm crazy. I think actually being the coach of this team and putting the line combos together is a harder job than being the GM of this team.
I can understand where you're coming from because it's going to be scrutinized and criticized throughout the next week here. And in such a short tournament, if you make a bad read, if you have a line that doesn't work, if Connor McDavid with Mitch Marner and Sam Reinhart doesn't work, you need to know when to pull shoot as well. Like after one game, you go, okay, give them time to gel. If it's not going great, okay, if there's 2 slow games, your tournament might be over though. So it is tough.
I think that's a great time to now point out too, that there are a couple subtle differences between this tournament and NHL play. For one, you mentioned how short the tournament is. It's a round robin, so you play each country once. There's no semifinal.
Yep.
It's just the top 2 teams from the round robin go right to the championship next Thursday night in Boston. 2, the overtime rules are different. And it's a 10-minute overtime when it comes to the round robin play. And then once you get to the final, it's Stanley Cup playoffs overtime, which would be electric if we ever got to that. And 3, related to all that, is that the point system is different. So it's not 2 points for a win. It's 3, 2, 1, 0. So 3 for a regulation win, 2 for an overtime win or a shootout win, and then 1 for an overtime or shootout loss.
I love that.
I've been advocating for a 3-2-1-0 system in the NHL regular season.
Mm-hmm.
I know why they don't want to do that, because it creates more separation in the standings and everyone wants to think that their team is in it, even if it's a mirage. New York Islanders. But when you think about that point system in a short tournament, it kind of creates a little bit of a different vibe or intensity of, our team's going to be playing for overtime? Is someone going to press to get the regulation win? What kind of fireworks could we see in the last games to determine who gets to the championship? That's going to be something to think about.
We could get the rare scenario where a game is tied and a team's pulling their goalie in the third period going, we aren't moving on to the next game unless we get a third point here.
We're pulling you with 7 minutes left.
Something
whatever
crazy.
It is. I don't know. It'd be awesome.
Could be wild.
Sorry to hijack your Canada question,
No.
but I just wanted to kind of map out. There are some differences with this tournament that you're going to have to understand the nuances. And I think, to your point, it's really well made in that the team that, I think the coaching staff that does the best in this tournament will be the coaching staff that makes the best adjustments most quickly.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. Okay, so for every team, Frank, we're going to give our biggest strength, our biggest question mark. We're going to give a roster regret, and then we're going to give an X factor. For Canada, we've been talking about the forward group. I think it's very easy. Their biggest strength is the high-powered offense, right? Like being able to go Crosby, McDavid, and if you wanted to, in the third period, almost always have one of those 2 guys on the ice. That's massive.
It's such a flex. It's an embarrassment of riches for Team Canada at the forward position, and frankly on defense too. You can throw difference makers out on the ice pretty much at any turn if you're John Cooper, and that's an amazing feeling to have that kind of power in your arsenal to throw at any opponent. It's the Canada that we know and expect and really enjoy watching, because they have so much ridiculous top-end talent that no matter what the goaltending looks like or how their defense plays, they're always going to be in the mix. And I think what's going to be really interesting to watch is, think back to the last time we saw true best on best, 2014 in Sochi. Canada choked the life out of every team in that tournament. It was clinical. I don't think we're going to see that type of tournament this time around from Canada. It's obviously a totally different roster. There's only a few holdovers. That said, I think you're going to see an explosive offense, and the true strength of this team is just the star-studded power that they can throw out there.
And it was evident when they were practicing the power play today. You can go Makar, McDavid, Crosby, McKinnon with Reinhart as the net front. And those 5 players, Frank, stayed on the ice later than anybody else. And one thing that I thought was really cool, just from a pure hockey nerd perspective, you know, that patented Sidney Crosby sort of low slot, top of the crease deflection play that he'll do, just almost golf chipping it over a goalie. He was sitting with Nathan McKinnon going like, I want it right here on my foot. Like, this is how you need to deliver it. They were working on giving goes, him and Connor McDavid. It was so cool to see Sidney Crosby out there working with those 2.
Here's the other part of this, and this goes for the U.S. as well, and probably to a lesser extent Sweden. Just because you have star-studded talent doesn't mean that they necessarily all fit together.
Yeah.
There's going to be an adjustment period. Chemistry does not come at the snap of a finger. We've seen really good players in the NHL regular season and playoffs thrown together that don't always gel and mix well. So not saying it won't happen, just saying that's the sort of beware of this, is just because you have really good players doesn't mean it's plug and play.
Yeah, exactly. Let's get to Canada's biggest weakness. And in a way, Frank, it's going to tie into my biggest roster regret for Canada. But at the time of them naming this team, there was a little bit of, especially with the forwards and D-men, they picked a couple of hot hands. And I was like, okay, you have to remember this tournament's not happening for 2 months. This was back in November. Just because someone's hot in November didn't mean they were going to stay hot until February. I think we've seen that with a guy like Sam Bennett. In between the pipes, they didn't pick the hot hand, though. They went with guys who they felt had a long run, a good reputation. Binnington, Hill, and then Montembeault did, to be fair, I guess, have a hot start. I feel way different.
Man, did he fall off? He wasn't even the starter for the Montreal Canadiens recently.
And I would feel so much different about this team and their chances of beating Team USA if Logan Thompson was on the roster. And again, he was the hot hand, and you didn't maybe know if it was a for sure thing, and maybe there were behind the scenes question marks as well. But
Steve Valiquette he mentioned that last week that, based on the experience that Pete DeBoer had with Logan Thompson, that there was no way that he was going to be on this team. I don't know if that's accurate or not. I'm not saying it isn't, just saying at least it helps kind of give you some perspective or explain what might have happened.
But again, biggest weakness for me.
And it's not like he's also going to be the savior.
Yeah,
it's not that if you pick Logan Thompson, all of a sudden
he's not Connor Hellebuck. Yeah,
right.
Is that also your biggest weakness? Do you have a different player that should be here?
No, it's the goaltending for me. I mean, it has to be. They have the 4th of 4 goaltending in this tournament, and I think that's probably by a pretty clear margin. But I think their biggest roster regret is that recency bias that you were talking about. The fact that Zach Hyman isn't on this team, the fact that Mark Scheifele isn't on this team. Look, we could nitpick that to death. Who are you going to take out? Travis Konechny, go through the roster. There's lots of guys that you could pick at, but I think in such a short tournament, given what we were just talking about with chemistry, I want as many kind of pairs or duos as possible. And I want Zach Hyman with Connor McDavid, just like I want Devon Toews with Cale Makar. Yeah. Less questions, more go.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think, and I've watched obviously a lot of Connor McDavid. He works best with an elite puck retriever. I don't know if Mitch Marner and Sam, they're great players.
They're not dogged puck retrievers. That we've done all this work at Daily Faceoff, archetyping players. How many times have I said Zach Hyman, best press player in the league? Yeah. Bar none.
Pushes the D-men back, creates space for Connor McDavid.
He's an animal.
Yeah, he is. He should absolutely be here. The X factor for Team Canada, Frank. What do you have for them in this tournament? What's going to fuel them?
I'm real curious to see, as mentioned, how they play defensively. And that's why I have as the X factor is Anthony Cirelli. John Cooper obviously has a huge say in this team, not from a management perspective, but obviously from his input in helping make sure that a guy like Cirelli is selected to this team. He can be a Selke level defender. And I think the versatility that he has will go a long way in helping this team Canada, that if Anthony Cirelli has a great tournament, there's probably a really, really good chance that Canada's the team with the gold medals around their neck.
And if you can trust Anthony Cirelli, which you absolutely can, in a high-pressure matchup against an Austin Matthews or whoever, does that just make life way easier for Connor McDavid and Sidney Crosby? Because then one of them, boy, they're getting a gravy matchup when you look at some of the bottom sixes around this tournament.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah.
As many matchups as you can get that are set it and forget it.
Mm-hmm.
So nice.
Yeah, that's fair. Taking a look at the D pairings here, Drew Doughty. He was a late add with Alex Pietrangelo out. Doughty's only played 6 games this year. Were you surprised to see him actually in the lineup? Also, it'll be weird wearing number 89 because Cale Makar had dibs on number 8.
Yeah, not surprised. Look, Drew Doughty is a stallion. You don't pick Drew Doughty to have him be your 3rd pair or 7th defenseman. If you wanted to do that, you could go out and get someone else. Yeah. He steps right into the Kings lineup, having gotten hurt in preseason, and is back to playing 24, 25, 26 minutes a night. And the fact that he did it playing almost 50 minutes on back-to-backs in the first 2 games that he was back, he wants this Four Nations tournament.
That was a message to Team Canada, him playing all those minutes. I know he's got to for LA,
but look, go back to my reporting before he even got hurt. He was saying in his big motivation this summer and entering training camp was to make this Team Canada team, to say that, hey, I'm 30 some years old now. Don't forget about me. I'm one of the holdovers left over from Vancouver in 2010. really important, impactful player that you don't stick on the third pair.
Yeah, I like that. I also think having Drew Doughty around, like you said, we know how badly he wants to be here. Does that rub off a little bit? I noticed today at skate, it was a very militaristic practice. It was like whistle, go. And then there was Brad Marchand. He scores on a breakaway at one point. He celebrates, kind of jumps into the glasses, hugging his teammates. Then he starts barking across the ice. First line over at McKinnon and them who are on the other side. So I think Canada needs a little bit more of that kind of swagger with him. I like Doughty and Marchand to do that.
Well, what I really like about Doughty in that case is, given what we just talked about how much this means to him, if there's anyone in that room, which I doubt it, but if there is anyone in that room that's like, made up tournament, we're just here for fun, he's going to beat that out of you because this means something to him, even though there's not a ton on the line.
And like you said, a veteran voice had carry some weight in that room for Team Canada. They got a handful of those. We're going in alphabetical order, so not like we're picking any sort of favorites here, but Finland is next on our list, Frank. And hey, we talked about Pietrangelo bowing out for Canada, the injury question mark with Sidney Crosby. Boy, Finland has their own injury concerns. The good news is Mikko Rantanen is going to play in the opener, it sounds like. So that is a sigh of relief. But that blue line, Ville Heinola is the only Finnish-born defenseman to play a game in the NHL who was not on this roster at some point here with all the injuries. It's crazy to see how banged up they are.
That's why it's not the 4 nations face-off. It's the 3.5 nations face-off. Really, that's what it's become now for Team Finland. And it's disappointing because you look at this defense pairing group here, and this isn't really a good NHL defense group in the NHL, let alone playing in a best-on-best international tournament. It's unfortunate for Finland, really proud hockey country that is going to scrap. You're going to get their best effort, but for me, it's a clear weakness, and they are the clear 4 of 4. I was talking to a couple of management types around the league today as I was making my way into Montreal, and we were talking about Finland, and they said, Rasmus Ristolainen, obviously he was, the last scratch from this Finland roster, and a couple of them said to me, hey, they're better off. Maybe not having Ristolainen here is great. And I was like, hold on a second here. The pieces that we're adding, like we're now down to a guy who's played 18 NHL games this season. Ville Heinola, the only one that hasn't made it, same number of games. Like you're digging and scraping at the bottom of the barrel if you're Finland. And that's part of the other equation with the rules here. You can't just bring any other Finnish defenseman, which someone playing in Europe would probably be way better suited for. You have to be on an NHL roster and under NHL contract. So that's the other part of this. This is not a double IHF tournament. This is not a true international tournament. This is an NHLPA sanctioned tournament, and that's it.
Yeah, and I did see, again, in sort of the conversation around the tournament, people being like, why isn't Czechia there? Why aren't they playing? And it's like, because they actually couldn't ice a team. Like, again, it has to be NHL players under an NHL contract. So are we both kind of agreeing the biggest question mark is going to be that blue line for Finland?
100%. It's not only their biggest question mark, it's their biggest detriment.
Yep.
But I prefer to look at Finland's strength. And for me, it's their brain power.
Okay.
If you look at this forward group, this is a team that thinks its way around the ice. Not only do you have perhaps the smartest player in the league in Alexander Barkov, but you've also got, so many other guys that are elite brains. Sebastian Aho, Rupe Hintz, Mikael Granlund. These are really, really smart, intelligent hockey players that their hockey IQ should drive them to make not just smart decisions, but also to make life really difficult when going up against some of these superpower teams like you see in Canada and the US. And not only that, but Finland, Sweden, in any tournament, no matter how banged up Finland is going to be must watch.
Yeah, I love their depth down the middle. Again, if you can go Alexander Barkov against whoever you're playing against, number one line, you have a pretty good chance of winning that matchup, or at least as Barkov does, sawing off that matchup. And then you just keep going. Sebastian Aho, Rupe Hintz, Anton Lundell. Again, those guys can go right up against
their depth is almost as good as any other team when it comes to their forward group.
Yeah, like having Anton Lundell as your 4C is legit. It's like Seravalli light in a way.
Yeah, but don't discount Yoel Armia either. Montreal Canadian playing in his home building. That line has been incredibly impactful for the Canadians this year, particularly before Emil Heineman got hurt. And look, I'm not saying Finland is going to win the tournament or anything like that, but don't be surprised to see this team in games late, even with the defense that they have, because they still have some really good goaltending.
I know, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. Obviously, there isn't a roster regret on the blue line because, like I said, they don't really have much to pick from. But is there a roster regret up front?
I don't think so.
No.
I mean, I think again, you're dealing with depth and numbers, right?
Yeah.
So when our guy Stephen Ellis was working through the roster projections, like you're not really leaving a ton off.
Yeah, that's fair. So let's get to the biggest X factor, Frank. I think there is no one player facing more pressure to carry their team than UC Saros. I think when you look around at every other roster, you see so many superstars, and it's like, okay, even if this number one guy isn't rolling, someone else will pick up the slack here and there. In Canada, again, is any one goalie facing pressure? No. But it is all on Saros, I think, for Finland to overcome what's in front of him on that blue line. And listen, he's not had a great year in Nashville. He has not looked like vintage UC Saros.
No one in Nashville has had a great year.
That is an excellent point. But if Saros can find his form, he is a game changer, a game stealer, and they're going to need him to do that. He's my X factor.
I love you, but I don't award any points on an X factor basis for the obvious.
Okay.
So I'm going to go with Rupe Hintz. I think when you think about how the Dallas Stars have played and their deep runs in the playoffs, so much of it hinges on Hintz and his impact. So, look, I think he's a massive part of this Team Finland team that if he could find a way to put up points and create and drive that line that he's on, then Finland's got a puncher's chance.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Again, no Miro Heiskanen. That is a big, big loss for this team. But again, they're going to be scrappy. That's Finnish hockey, right? I love a guy as well like Arturi Lehkonen.
He's a great. I was thinking about him as X Factor. Another brainiac.
He scored some big goals. He scored some big goals in that Bell Center building as well.
Yeah, exactly. Very familiar. So he'd be a great candidate for that. See? You answered your own question.
Yeah, I came up with a new one on the fly. Look at me go. Let's go out and talk a little bit about Team Sweden, Frank. Uffe Bodin had the preview for us over at dailyfaceoff.com, and I actually thought he started it in kind of a nice, meaningful way when it comes to this tournament. As much as it's unfortunate that a couple of the games are going to be starting very early in the morning in Sweden time, he talked about how no best on best. That hurts the Swedish hockey's culture and their ability to identify and build relationships with their star players because, again, they're playing in the NHL in the middle of the night. He talked about how important this is. Maybe it's a few years too late when you look at some of this roster. They have some aging pieces there, but still, it's a pretty good group.
They also have a couple afternoon games, do they not?
Well, they will get the one on Saturday will be in the afternoon. And do they have the Monday or are they at night still?
I think they also have one then too. So
okay.
I think they did try and whenever possible.
One of them or Finland only has the one, but you're right. One of them would have
so
two.
that'll help a little bit, not a ton, but I think the point's really well made. I mean, look, we went to and saw Uffe last year at the Global Series in Stockholm, and same kind of thing. Like they don't get enough of a viewing of their NHL stars that to get a weekend like they had last year and have 4 games played in Stockholm was such a big game changer for kids and fans everywhere just to see them live up close and in person. You look at this forward group, it's really good.
Yep.
They're a team that I think has an incredible blend of skill and also compete. I mean, I look at this group and I say, Willem Nylander, you need someone to go get you pucks and do stuff, like make things happen with the puck on his stick.
Second in the league in goals.
He's going to do that.
Yep.
Jesper Bratt, this might be one of those tournaments where I don't know if it's fair to call it a coming out party for someone who's been a top 20 scorer in the NHL, but you see the impact that he can make. And look, maybe their third and fourth line isn't quite as good. And I'd actually probably give Finland an edge in their depth when it comes to looking at that fourth line. But I still really like what I think the strength of this team Sweden is, which is their defense. Big, mean, nasty.
NHL-sized ice. This isn't an international tournament going on the big ice. So having those big D-men, giddy up.
It's that they have, for my money, the best defense core in this tournament. So you look at it's the Beards. It's Matthias Ekholm.
That blue line's going to be legit. And then Philip Gustafsson's behind them as well. And he is putting together a great season. A couple wobbles maybe there as it went on. But still, he's been very good for Minnesota. We'll see what ends up happening with Linus Ullmark as well if he gets into games. But
the big question for me with the Swedes, though, is definitely the health of their goalies.
Yeah.
You mentioned Ullmark, And Gustafsson obviously has had a tremendous season for the most part, but you've got Sam Ersson there as your third goalie. And he's actually had his moments with the Flyers this year, but Ullmark as a very shaky number 2, given his health status, that's a big concern for me. And also just one quick minor quibble when looking at their defense core. I like Jonas Brodin, but I would have gone with Hampus Lindholm there.
Is that your biggest roster regret?
It is.
Okay.
I think a subtle change, not a huge thing. Like, it's not going to game changing, not a tournament changing thing, but I think that is a roster regret for Team Sweden.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. So the strength is their strong D-men. The biggest regret, maybe not having Hampus Lindholm. Crazy that blue line could actually have been bigger, meaner, and stronger. What's the biggest question mark for Team Sweden? I wrote...
I have health of the goalies.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So you did touch on that a little bit. I had the bottom 6 wingers there. Like
but that's a great point. Like, we were just talking about that, looking at their depth. I'd actually choose Team Finland's bottom 6 over Team Sweden's.
Yeah, like, I mean, again, Victor Arvidsson is not having a good year right now with the Edmonton Oilers.
Gustav Nyquist has struggled after a 75-point year, but he's also been in Nashville.
I'm curious.
Lindholm has really struggled.
But now he's properly slotted, right? Like, we talked about the Bruins signed Lindholm thinking he could be the guy. That's
properly
not who
slotted
he is.
if he could keep up.
Yeah,
that's my big concern. I don't know what's happened there.
I think Eriksson Ek too.
Lucas Raymond, though, is a pretty good flex on your third line right wing.
Yeah, north of 20 goals this year.
On track for 90-some points, 93 points.
This Sweden forward group that you're looking at right now, if you include...
And Joel Eriksson Ek, speaking of their defense, big and nasty, like, he is he's total handful to play against.
This forward group has combined for 209 goals this season. That is 17 more than Finland. So their European counterparts, they are, though, 3rd and 4th in that mark when you look at the tournament. So who's their X factor, Frank? What do you need to see from Team Sweden? Who, I should say, either one of those two, what's going to potentially propel them to? And, like, listen, I do think they have a chance to play spoiler in the sense that
if you told me that it was Canada, Sweden playing for the gold next Thursday in Boston, I wouldn't be shocked.
Like, again, I think a lot of people
they think it's just a 2-nation tournament.
Yeah.
And I don't think I think writing off both European countries is a big mistake.
Yeah. And Sweden again
look,
is...
we just talked about some of the issues that Finland has on their blue line. Like, we didn't get to US yet and Quinn Hughes, but is no for sure thing. I'm telling you right now. Yeah.
That is totally fair. Do you want to get to Team USA then?
I'll give you my X factor.
Yeah, sorry,
it's Adrian Kempe. Look, I think the fact that he plays in LA, I don't know how much people see of him, but this guy, he's a horse. And he's
also a prick to play against.
Yeah, he's tough to play against, but I think this could be his. You remember at going back to the World Cup of Hockey in 2017, that was kind of like Brad Marchand's moment. Do you remember that? He signed his extension during that.
Scored that massive goal.
And he fit in so perfectly on Team Canada. That's what this is for Adrian Kempe. Really, really good player in the NHL that doesn't get nearly enough love.
I think that is totally fair. Again, see a bit of him out in the Western Conference, and yeah, he's a chippy player, and obviously he can put up the offense. Another reason why, again, that Finland offense can be sneaky dangerous in this tournament. Let's go to Team USA, Frank. And while I talked about Canada having a very militaristic style practice, USA was definitely serious. But at the end, I was having a lot of fun watching. It was the Kachuk brothers and Hughes, and a bunch of them were out there playing rebound, and they were laughing, throwing their sticks at each other. This team, this forward group, they ooze swagger and cockiness. And that's kind of become the USA hockey brand a little bit when you think of like the World Juniors.
Yeah, and look, for good reason, right? Yeah. This is an incredible opportunity, this tournament, to make a statement for the first time in the history of the game that the U.S. has surpassed Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Back-to-back World Junior Golds, you producing some of the best top-end talent in the league, but they haven't done it. They haven't won an Olympics since 1980. They haven't won World Cup of Hockey. It was embarrassing how bad they were in 2017 at the World Cup of Hockey. And they've had their moments at the Olympics, whether it was the gold medal game in 2010 or the different runs that they've given Canada. But whether it's statistics, whether it's top-end players, national development program, draft picks. You can point to whatever metric you want. All that matters in the end is wins and rings. And the U.S. hasn't had it. But this could be a declarative statement to pound your fist on the table and say that the U.S. has finally passed Canada. I think, watching just the pure numbers, you could say, hey, maybe this is inevitable. Maybe this has been coming for a while. I know a lot of Canadians feel a bit of that, but you got to win.
Yeah, absolutely. You talked about Quinn Hughes, so let's head over to that. I don't know if it's quite your biggest question mark, but Quinn Hughes not here. That's a massive loss.
Hart Trophy caliber player, and now you take this defense core that was good and had some really nice pieces. Like, there's not going to be a huge drop off in running a power play from Quinn Hughes to Adam Fox, and you've got a really good defender in Jacob Slavin playing with him. And I really like the balance of this U.S. defense core. But to me, the biggest question for the U.S. in this tournament is the size of their defense. Quinn Hughes, 5'11", he's gone. But Adam Fox, 5'11". Charlie McAvoy is tied for the tallest guy on the defense core, and he's 6'1". I'm not saying it's necessarily going to be the difference maker, but when you are going against a vaunted Canadian attack that has the superstars, maybe skating ability is more important than than size. But in this case, I'm a little bit concerned about, will the U.S. defense be worn down by Canada as this tournament goes on, or by another team? It could be a ground and pound offense from a team like Finland. I could see that being a closer game than expected for the U.S. because as much as their offense has the star power and the goal scoring ability, you got to be able to defend. The really nice part about that is that on the other end of it, you've got Connor Hellebuyck.
And that is a luxury that only Team USA has, and it's Connor Hellebuyck between the pipes. They have a lot of strengths, like you said, and we'll talk about the forward group in a little bit. But for me, we'll do our predictions in a bit. I think Connor Hellebuyck's going to be a massive storyline in this tournament. I think he has a chance to be the best player, the most impactful player.
I think that's a fair statement. If you're ranking the top, so you're going to go top to bottom 12 goalies in this tournament, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that the U.S. goes 1, 2, 4 or something like that.
Totally fair.
So they've got, and also if you're looking at some of the most recent numbers, remember we were talking in the beginning of the show about Canada and the hot hand?
Yeah.
Connor Hellebuyck, 9-13 since Jan 1. Jake Ottinger, 9-15. They're in a really good spot. I don't even know if we're going to see Jake Ottinger in this tournament, which is saying something because he's still really good. But that's the biggest strength for the U.S. is 100% their goaltending, which makes them kind of the polar opposite of Canada.
Yeah, no back-to-backs in this tournament. So again, totally possible that we do see Connor Hellebuyck just play every game. I have him as my biggest strength. Biggest question mark for you?
Is the size on defense.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah, we did touch on that. That is my bad. Biggest roster regret.
I think when you look at this team, and look, it's a nitpicky thing. It's kind of like when you're going after Canada and you're talking about their defense and what that looks like, or however you slot their rosters and Zach Hyman. For me, it's picking Brock Nelson and or Chris Kreider over just some of the other talent that was available for this team. There was a healthy dose of recency bias in selecting a team, and Jason Robertson for me is the guy that stands out. Look at Jason Robertson's numbers since Christmas. There's a reason why the Dallas Stars have been one of the best teams in the league. He found a gear that he's gotten to and a level that was back in the, that's maybe one of the biggest statements that the U.S. made in selecting this team is we can leave off a 45, 50 goal scorer and 100-point player, and no one really says anything because Jason Robertson had played his way off of this roster to start the year. So that would be it for me.
I think that's fair. This does kind of tie in a little bit to my X factor in this one, Frank, because I wanted to talk a bit more about the forward group. My X factor is Brady Tkachuk. I think when you line
That's
up
a great one.
when you line up all the bottom sixes in this tournament, just right across the board, there is no player playing and slotted in a bottom six who has the ability to be more impactful than Brady Tkachuk in every facet of the game.
I think that's a perfect one because he not only has skill, but has that edge and bite to him that I think this U.S. roster, they don't have it on the back end not necessarily, but they do up front. They've got a bunch of guys who are willing to get in your grill and get in your kitchen, which is why my X factor is this fourth line. They've got some pieces there that when you look at, and Pat, if you could throw up the U.S. Forward group again, you look at their lineup and it is like Vincent Trocheck to me. I know what the Rangers have had this season. His versatility, his compete. You've got Brock Nelson there, whether or not he's in, and Kreider was the guy that was rotating on that fourth line. If you could go Trocheck, Kreider, Nelson, or Larkin, Trocheck, Kreider, it's a pretty damn good fourth line. And not that Canada doesn't have that, but if the U.S. can find a way to get some bottom, contributions out of their lineup, they're going to be in good shape.
Yeah, that's totally fair. What do you make of the top part of this lineup going Eichel and Matt Tkachuk, going Matthews and Jack Hughes? I really like the balance on that top line. Again, elite finisher in Kyle Connor, elite distributor and Jack Eichel, and an elite everything man in Matt Tkachuk. You want to talk about a guy who can just drive in there and create havoc and chaos? That is absolutely going to be Matt Tkachuk. Second line?
Well, the second line I love, though.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I mean, Jack Hughes, elite distributor.
Yeah, he is.
Austin Matthews and Jake Ensel, two great, unbelievable goal scorers.
Yeah, I mean, Jack Hughes could just be putting it on a platter for those guys all tournament.
I mean, and you still have Connor that can produce goals on that top line. Eichel is not a shooter, not a scorer, but Matthew Tkachuk, he can do a lot of different things too. So it's funny, you mentioned the top two lines. My eye is drawn to the bottom of this lineup because I just think the strength of it is so important for the U.S. Matt Boldy, heavy player, JT Miller, ultimate competitor, and Brady Tkachuk.
Well, and we now know the kind of player that JT Miller likes to play with, or maybe more the kind of player he doesn't like to play with, but you don't think he's just salivating getting to be on the line?
None of those guys on this team.
Yeah, but he's going to love playing with Brady Tkachuk.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is why the U.S. selected JT Miller. And when he was picked and the team was named, he was in the middle of his leave of absence. Correct. So this was all still going on then. And I think the U.S. feels really good about their decision to pick him.
Yeah, that's totally fair. We are live on the Daily Faceoff YouTube as always. If anybody wants to drop in some questions for later on in the show, put them in now with the hashtag AskDFO. Frank, I see we had someone in here and I just lost their name, but they were watching, joining us from France. So we are we're in Montreal, a lot of French speaking, but good to see we got a listener in French. Also, someone gave me shit in the chat for being on my phone during the stream. It's my notes. I need to be able to see what the chat's doing.
I can't always remember when you got 4 teams and like 16 different categories. I can't remember everything I wrote down.
Drop in your comments or your questions, and we'll get to those in a little bit here. But we're also going to wrap up the show with our predictions as well. But Frank, I got a little over-under game for you, or under-over game here, whichever way you want to dice it up. And I got some numbers. Here's the first one because it ties into some of those players with Jam on Team USA, Frank. The line is set at half, so we only need one. But fights in the tournament. Do you think there's a chance things get heated enough where we see a fight over under half?
I'm going to take the under.
You don't think so?
It's not that it's going to be an all-star like tournament, but none of these guys are really looking for it. And I think there's such a high-end skill quotient that I think their teams at home would be cringing if any of these guys are fighting.
Yeah, that's probably a fair point. I was sitting there and being like, okay, if a game gets heated, like
I could see JT Miller fighting
or Brady Tkachuk,
but I think that's the last thing anyone wants.
Yep, I do think that's fair. I'm doubtful too, but shout out to our friends at hockeyfights.com. I had to ask the question. The next one I have for you, I'm going to set the line at 3.5. Widest margin of victory in a game in this tournament. Do you think they're all going to be tight? Do you think there's a chance we get a 5-1,
I think
6-2?
Canada could win over Finland 6-1.
Okay.
I think it could be that lopsided. That offense against that defense, problematic. And it's not like, not knocking UC Saros, but It's not like there haven't been a couple blow up games in Nashville so far this year either.
Yeah, and as we kind of said when we were previewing Finland, his numbers this year have not been UC Saros like. Last one I have for you: tournament's leading goal scorer. So think of it, 3 round robin games and then potentially a final for them. Over under 5.5 goals.
Over.
Really, you think someone could get to 6 goals in 4 games?
I wouldn't be shocked if someone had a hat trick for sure.
Yeah, but then it's a hat trick. Then you think in the other 3 games you got to be a goal a game. It is a high number.
Is it?
I'm going to ask you for your
2-2-2-2. Like, I don't know.
I don't
2-2-1-3. I mean 2-0-1-3.
2 hat tricks. Yeah, I guess you could dice it up a whole bunch of different ways.
Yeah.
And there is
giving me flashbacks to my Saquon Barkley 20 yards per quarter yesterday. That didn't work out.
Sitting there trying to do all the math. How many? 14 so far? What is it? Okay, let's get into some hashtag Ask DFO questions. It's brought to you by our friends at Charm Diamond Centers. You can get a custom ring built and delivered in less than 4 weeks through Charm and the Masterpiece program. Find out more by visiting them online at charmdiamondcenters.com. We got a couple here. Chell is in. He watches our show every day. He says, what sort of officiating style do you think we're going to get? More international or NHL style? It is NHL refs.
NHL.
Colton says, if Russia would have been in, what would they have done for the 6th team potentially to even it out? Would you have seen another team Europe? That would be interesting. Again, the Russia thing was a non-conversation.
That's why we run into this issue with 4 nations is because honestly, I wouldn't have had an issue if you made it 5.
Mm-hmm.
Geopolitical part of this aside, like I'm perfectly fine with Russia not participating in this tournament. However, you really struggle to find a 6th team, and not just because of the NHL rules, like Czechia, Slovakia, like you go through some of the typical hockey participating countries, Switzerland, they're struggling to keep up at this level.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about spread between goals in a game. You're going to see blowouts, and no one really needs to see that.
Yeah, I do think that's fair.
One of the biggest issues with this tournament, not this one, but a tournament like that, the more you expand it, is the marketability of it. Because, look, I was at the 2017 World Cup of Hockey in Toronto. Scotiabank Arena, you couldn't give tickets away to some of those games between European countries in the afternoon. That was in September. But even putting it here, there's going to be an interesting test case, I'm telling you, in terms of tickets here. Montreal's a unique market. It really is, in the sense that not that they don't support Team Canada, but we all know what the geopolitical scene is. And I've been to World Juniors here in Montreal where they didn't sell out a gold medal game between the U.S. and Canada. It's international hockey. It's not quite the same.
Yeah. All right. We got one more we'll get to here, and it comes in from Carousel Vertigo, they asked which team has the best power play, but I kind of want to take it a different angle. Down by a goal late in the game, what team can put over the boards the best collection of 6 players to try tie it up? The hero line,
Canada.
If you will.
Still Canada.
Flash up, Pat. Can you flash up Team USA's forward group, though? Because if you throw Brady Tkachuk in front of the net, you have Matt Tkachuk around there as well.
Austin Matthews.
Jack Hughes. Like, it starts, I think it's razor thin is kind of my point. Because you just have those disruptors with Tkachuk,
but
with the 2 Tkachuks.
But you just don't have Cale Makar on the back end. That was Quinn Hughes. And as much as I like Adam Fox and he's won a Norris, Adam Fox is not on the Makar Hughes level. He just isn't.
You know who, and I forgot to bring this up because I debated making him my X factor for Team USA. I can't wait to see what Zach Werenski does in this tournament.
And that's a great point. You know what? I'm sleeping a little bit on Zach Werenski and the season that he's had because he's been that good.
Yeah, and listen, he's not playing with scrubs in Columbus. That's not what I'm getting at here. Kirill March, there's
just
some of the
different level.
It is, right? Like, he doesn't have a superstar running mate with him in Columbus. I think if you throw him on that top power play in Team USA, I think he thrives in that spot.
I could see it.
Yeah, it would be quite something. A little bit of betting talk for our friends over at Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Now, to win this tournament outright, the Canadians are favorites. They're plus 140.
Shocking.
USA razor thin. They are right behind them at plus 150. But I wanted to talk about one bet I love is top goal scorer, Frank, and you can get a look at those odds right there. But top goal scorer in this tournament, Austin Matthews is the favorite at plus 800. I actually think my favorite play, he is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th on the odds board. Nathan McKinnon at 15-1 to score the most goals in this tournament. He'll be the finishing guy next to Sidney Crosby. I could see Sid setting him up.
Second in the league in goals right now?
Third. I think he's behind Nylander.
I mean, pretty solid choice.
15-1?
Look, I love the juice. You got to have a little, and I wouldn't be playing Connor McDavid at 10-1 here.
No, not goal scorer. Point scorer for goals and assists. McDavid is the favorite at plus 250, but I mean, it goes McDavid, McKinnon, Makar, then Crosby. You actually don't get to an American till pretty low down on that list. Who would you bet on to be the Americans' top point scorer?
Matthew Tkachuk.
Matthew Tkachuk is tied for third on the list. It does go Matthews 1, Hughes 2, and then Eichel and Tkachuk are tied for third. Not disparaging anyone when I say this, but Jack Hughes really hasn't impressed me that much this season. I'm disappointed in him because coming into the year, I had him as my sleeper Hart Trophy pick. I thought last year he was so good till he got hurt. Remember, he was almost a goal a game.
But he hasn't gotten to that level since he got hurt.
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong at all. He really hasn't gotten to that point.
So I don't know why. I mean, I get why, because he has the ability, but I wouldn't be picking him too.
Yeah, that's fair. Again, this tournament gets going on Wednesday night. Sweden and Canada. Canada open up that game massive minus 250 favorites on Bet365. We're going to keep being live back at our usual time as well at noon Eastern for the rest of the week. So we'll have more on that game as we get a little bit closer, Frank. But let's wrap this bad boy up with our predictions for the tournament. I want your winner. Give me the final. Give me your leading scorer prediction for the whole tournament. I guess I kind of ruined mine with Nate McKinnon, but I'm going to say McKinnon's highlight is he'll have a 4-point performance in Canada's win over Finland, and then give me your MVP. So give me your winner and MVP.
So I'm going to go Canada beating the U.S. So even as a proud flag-waving American, can't accuse me of the homer pick.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that forward group is going to be really overwhelming to play against. They can win any which way you want. You want to play physical? They can do that. You want to play fire wagon hockey? The Canadians can do that. I think they're really well situated, and the goaltending is important. I just don't know if it'll be the ultimate difference maker. And it's an incredible flex that the U.S. has in net, but it's a short tournament, and we've seen in the past, look at the playoffs last year. Connor Hellebuck blew up in round 1 against the Colorado Avalanche and Nathan McKinnon. Could it happen? Sure. I'm not saying he's going to be bad. I'm just saying the goaltending that Canada's going to get should be average enough that with the group they have in front of him should cover up a lot of those mistakes.
I think it's funny that you and I are on opposite sides of this, but I am going to say we get the Canada-USA final, and I'm going to say the USA wins. Listen, I think it's a coin flip, and I'm a fan of storylines, obviously. I can't think of a better storyline than USA winning. They're on top of the hockey world, and that's what leads us into the Olympics next year. It's Canada's revenge tour in Italy.
I love it the other way, because I'm like, let Canada win again. You can have this one. 2026 Olympics, the U.S. is coming for you.
That would be something too, but the revenge angle, I mean, that'll be fascinating. I do think
leading scorer, though, it's hard for me to go against Nathan McKinnon.
I feel like it makes too much sense. He's playing unbelievable hockey.
He's got
right
a
now.
4-point edge right now on the rest of the league.
Yep.
So I don't know. He's been that good, and the amazing part is obviously with the trade, Mikko Rantanen. It's going to be wild to watch those two guys go against.
How about
each other
Pettersson
too.
versus Miller?
Yeah, that's going to be pretty tasty as well.
There are some just awesome matchups. Again, Canada-Sweden to open up the tournament on Wednesday, just the one game, and then you go on Thursday with USA versus Finland, a doubleheader on Saturday, and it's the rivalry day to wrap up the Montreal portion of the tournament with Finland, Sweden, and Canada-USA. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be live every single weekday at noon Eastern, and even doing some post-game lives as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Maybe I'll have to pour myself up the JP Wiser's, the official whiskey of game night. Maybe everyone at home, that'll be a nice post-game routine. You watch Four Nations, pour yourself a JP Wiser's on the rocks, kick your feet up, watch our live.
I just had one the other day, and I did Hot Take Hockey. Our friends Jeremiah, huge Daily Faceoff fan, popped into his show, poured myself a JP Wiser's, and enjoyed a little nightcap. That's a good
life. That's a good life right there. I like it. All right, everybody in the YouTube, we were great. You were great. Appreciate you dropping in your questions. We hope to see you back on our shows throughout the remainder of the week, as we are going to be live, not just in Montreal, but we're making the trek to Boston as well. Wall-to-wall coverage over at dailyfaceoff.com as well. Shout out to our guy Brock Sagan for putting together the jerseys.
So good.
You had to have it.
You guys know, you know him, you love him, you come to expect him. Just go to the Line Combos page. We got you covered every day. Matt Larkin's going to be writing some great stories. Stephen Ellis is always on top of things. Hopefully we get a contribution here from Uwe Bowden, Anthony DeMarco on site. And really appreciate the huge work and muscle and effort that we've gotten from our entire Daily Faceoff Nation Network team here, Amol Delic, and the work that he's done with Nick Caroli putting this all together. We are trying to bring you the best independent live coverage there is on YouTube and beyond, and we're really proud to do it.
Yeah, really, really excited for everything we're going to do in the next couple of weeks. For Frank, our producer, Pat Puff, who is keeping things rolling behind the scenes, I'm Tyler Yaremchuk saying good night, and we'll talk again tomorrow at noon Eastern. What's up, hockey fans? If you like that video, do not forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the Daily Faceoff YouTube, because we have tons of great content, from exclusive interviews on The Sheet with Jeff Merrick to instant analysis and breaking news with our Daily Faceoff insider, Frank Seravalli, on Daily Faceoff Live, to your go-to morning duo, Johnny Lazarus and Colby Cohn on Morning Cup of Hockey. Plenty of great content, wall-to-wall, team-to-team, all the way across the entire league. And you won't miss it if you subscribe.